Hello everybody and welcome to week 8 of the longest running league-oriented fantasy football podcast, The Cap. The only way they're going to catch up is if we slow down, and you know that's not going to happen. Last week we saw a drop in scoring, and for the second week in a row we see scoring drop yet again this week. Only 2 teams making it into triple digits. I think all of us are trying to navigate the bye weeks that are kicking in all across the NFL, and the injuries are piling up. There was one especially huge injury this week in the NFL that's going to dramatically affect one of the teams in our league. We'll cover that in the highlights. After the highlights, we'll pass out some cheese to the Offensive Player of the Week, the Offensive Snub of the Week, and Pete's Troll of the Week. We will get a double dose this time. If you remember, the Cap was dark in week 5, but fans of the Cap, they don't want to make a portion of the podcast, just to make a portion of the Troll of the Week for week 5. I'm not one to disappoint, so we'll have 2 Trolls of the Week. And guys, what other fantasy football league do you know has fans that aren't even playing in it, following it week to week? That's not only a testament to the league, but also to the owners who make it up. We have yet to have that one owner that participates in week 1 and 2 and then never shows up the rest of the season. Although with Huang that keeps starting all those Denver homers makes me think twice about that. But hey, it's his team. So with all of that out of the way, let's begin this week's action, starting with the game of the week. It was Northern Kid Jared Kubasik versus Pedro IC Red People. The Thursday night game having a ton of bearing in this matchup. Pedro starting running back Chase Edmonds, 30 yards and a touchdown for 12.9 points. And also wide receiver Rondale Moore, 3 receptions, 24 yards and anemic 1.7 points. On the other side, Jared has Minigoat, 184 yards, 2 touchdowns and 17.8 points. And he's stacking the points with Randall Cobb. Oh, this is exactly what he did in week 4 when he scored 140 points. Randall Cobb, 3 receptions, 15 yards. He caught both of Minigoat's touchdowns for 13.5 points. And of course, Mason Crosby made all of his field goals and extra points, brought in 6 points for the Northern Kid. On Sunday, Pedro started Justin Herbert, and with Minigoat scoring only 17.8 points, Pedro has a chance to put Jared in a hole with Justin Herbert. But Bill Belichick does his thing. He holds Justin Herbert to 223 yards, 2 touchdowns, picks him off twice for 15.6 points. In that same game, Pedro also had the Los Angeles Chargers defense and special teams. They allowed 21 points, get a fumble recovery, and bring in 5.6 points. In Denver, Jared starts J.D. McKissick and the Redskins defense. J.D. McKissick, he's a running back, but he did almost all his damage through the air. He had 10 rushing yards, 83 receiving for 9.3 points. And the Redskins defense against a very pedestrian Denver Broncos offense holds them to 17 points, has 1 fumble recovery, and you would have liked to have had a few sacks and an interception in there, Jared, but they got you only 8.2 points. In a low-scoring game between Pedro and Jared, Pedro breaks it open with Darrell Henderson Jr., running back for the Rams. 90 rushing yards, 2 total touchdowns, and 21.3 points. He also has the place kicker for the Rams, Matt Gay, 1 for 1 for field goals, made all his extra points, and had 8 points. Northern Kid starts to make up some ground, however. With that Buccaneers and Saints game, he starts Mike Evans. And in Jared's game, where the points are at a premium, Brady overthrows Mike Evans. Oh, that would have been a walk-in touchdown. Mike Evans would end up getting his, a 41-yard bomb from the GOAT. He finished with 2 receptions, 48 yards, and a touchdown for 10.8 points. Heading into Monday night, Pedro had a 6-point lead on Jared. They both had 1 player left, and they were both Kansas City Chiefs. Jared with Darrell Williams and Pedro with Tyreek the Streak Hill. From the get-go, you could tell the Chiefs were trying to get the ball into their playmakers' hands, which was bad news for Jared. Tyreek Hill targeted early and often. The opening drive ends up at 3rd and goal from the 5. Tyreek Hill split out wide. Darrell Williams not on the field, but Jared catches a huge break. The ball gets intercepted by the Giants. For once, the interception isn't off Tyreek Hill's hands, it's off Josh Gordon's head. Either way, Jared's out of a jam. But only 2 plays later, Danny Dine gives the ball right back to the Chiefs. And only 2 plays after that, Patrick Mahomes finds the cheetah in the back of the end zone for the touchdown. Pedro's lead now extended to 14 points. In the first quarter alone, the cheetah, 6 receptions, 66 yards, and a touchdown. In the second quarter, however, the Chiefs would turn to the running game. 5 straight running plays. Is it with Darrell Williams? No, it's with Gore. Frank Gore? No, Derek Gore. Any relation? No, just a coincidence. The Kansas City Chiefs rookie waits until Monday night to steal Darrell Williams' touches and touchdowns. That was a killer for you, Jared. They would use Darrell Williams in the passing game, but nowhere near the usage Tyreek Hill got. You take the 6-point lead Pedro had coming into the game, add Tyreek Hill's touchdown in the first quarter and consistent usage throughout the game, and even though Darrell Williams finished with 11 points, Tyreek Hill topped that with 15, giving Pedro his second win of the year. Chief, a much-needed win. Now I truly see red people. Improves to 2-6, and Jared Northern Kid, a crushing loss. You could have pulled into a first-place tie with the Tampa Bay Champions. Chief, plain spoiler. And even though you're 2-6, there's still 6 games to go in the season. And you know what we say around here in the LVFL. Stranger things have happened. So with the victory, Pedro, I see red people, improves to 2-6. With the loss, Jared Northern Kid drops to 4-4. Moving along to the next game on the tally, it was the Commish's Tampa Bay Champions versus the Buzzsaw, that is Josue and his Raider Nation. And Josue had the Buzzsaw starting early on Thursday night. James Conner against the Packers, 22 rushing yards, but 2 rushing touchdowns for 14.2 points. So right out the gate, smoking for Josue. And he only built on that running game with Alvin the Natural Kamara against the Bucks, gets 61 yards, a rushing touchdown for 13.6 points. The Commish looking for big points from that Tennessee Titans and Indianapolis Colts game, starting Derrick Henry and Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor's first play from scrimmage goes for 38 yards. He'd finish with 70 rushing yards, a touchdown for 18.2 points. The Colts, on the other hand, committed to having Derrick Henry not beat them. They stuffed the box all day long. Derrick Henry would leave in the second half with a foot injury and only 6.8 points. But the Commish still had the GOAT, Tom Brady, against that stingy New Orleans Saints defense, comes away with 375 yards, 4 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He also fumbled the ball once, but still brought in 29.5 points. But Josue starting Chris Godwin, and he absorbed a lot of those points from the GOAT. Chris Godwin, 8 receptions, 140 yards, and a touchdown for 20 points. And then the Commish came face-to-face with one Cooper Douglas Kupp, 7 receptions, 115 yards. This guy scores another touchdown this week for 17.7 points. Without a doubt, Matt Stafford's favorite weapon. And Matt Stafford is living his best life ever since coming over from Detroit. He said it when he first came over, this is what the NFL is supposed to feel like. You throw in Josh Allen against the Dolphins and it was curtains. Josh Allen throws for 249 yards, but what was more impressive is what he did with his legs. This big guy can move. 55 rushing yards. He finished with 3 total touchdowns and 30.9 points. The Commish has Emmanuel Sanders and tight end Mo Alley Cox, both with 0 points. Damn, not even a target. It's hard enough to beat Josue with a full roster. You got 2 guys putting in 0 points and you can forget about it. In the Battle of the Titans, Josue comes out on top, and now the undisputed #1 team in the LVFL at 7-1. The Commish loses his second game in a row and drops to 5-3. Moving along to the next game on the tally, it was Juan and his Orange Crush against Josue and Dak for MVP. Go Swift starting Kyler Murray on Thursday night against the Green Bay Packers, and Kyler Murray has his worst performance of the year by far. 270 yards, no touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 6.3 points. That was boding well for Juan. Also in that game, Gosue had Aaron Jones. He came through for Gosue, 59 yards on the ground, a touchdown for 17 points. In that same game, Juan had the Arizona defense and special teams up against a depleted Green Bay Packer offense, and Arizona gives up 24 points, no interceptions, no fumbles, no sacks, and that killed you, Juan. They only had 2 players to worry about, Minigoat and Aaron Jones, but the Cardinals defense at home brings in only 2.5 points. Another killer for you, Juan, was Ezekiel Elliott. Zeke the Freak. The Cowboys in Minnesota minus Dak Prescott don't lean on the running game. Rather, they go to the air, and that was a double whammy for you, Juan. Zeke with 50 yards and 7.3 points. And on the other side, Gosue has CeeDee Lamb. 6 receptions, 112 yards for 11.1 points. Gosue also started running back from the Patriots, Damian Harris. In the last 3 weeks, he's blown up 3 touchdowns in the last 2 games and adds 1 more with 80 rushing yards for 14 points. Juan bested that with Austin Eckler, moving a mountain of players all the way into the end zone for the touchdown. Oh, the little man with a Herculean effort, 64 yards rushing, 60 through the air for 18.4 points. And the homer Terry Bridgewater with the Redskins coming to town throws for 213 yards, 1 touchdown, and 12.5 points. Gosue in Atlanta has 4 receptions, 59 yards, and 5.9 points for DJ Moore, who's glad he's DJ Moore and not Robbie Anderson. Boom, shakalaka, and that hurts more when you see just how skinny Robbie Anderson really is. I mean, look at that. And you know, Cole Beasley's good for 3 games a year where he steps in and just takes it over. Gosue, you guessed right, and he has one of those weeks this week with 10 receptions, 110 yards, didn't make the end zone, it was all volume for 11 points. That iced it for you, and you still had Travis Kelce on Monday night, though it didn't factor into this game. But with the victory, Gosue Dak for MVP improves to 4-4. Juan and his Orange Crush dropped to 3-5. Moving along to the next game on the tally, it was Jordan Auto Draft versus Brant and his Las Vegas Aces. Jordan starts Jalen Hurts, the king of garbage time points, who struggled in a game where there was no garbage time. The Eagles up 41 points in the mid-4th quarter, and all he could come up with was 103 total yards for 10.2 points. Tua for Brant didn't do much better, 205 yards, 1 rushing touchdown, and interception for 13.2 points. You're going to need a better backup for Dak if Tua keeps this up, though he did play against Buffalo, which you happen to start this week. They give up 11 points, have an interception and a fumble recovery for 11.2 points. It got even worse with your 2 running backs combining for 3.9 points, but it was your receiving core where you're strong at, you're stacked. You could probably spare one of those receivers that kept you in the game. DK Metcalf, with Jacksonville coming to town, had 6 receptions, 43 yards, 2 touchdowns for 16.3 points. The stunner of the day, the Bengals go to New York, play the Jets, and lose. I take back what I said about the Bengals last week. Jamar Chase, 3 receptions, 32 yards, and a touchdown for 10.1 points. And A.J. Brown, in that wild one down in Indianapolis, comes away with 10 receptions, 155 yards, a touchdown for 21.5 points. And in true Bill Belichickian way, Jordan wins by running the ball and playing good defense. Najee Harris, 91 yards, a touchdown for 18 points. Mighty Joe Mixon with a little trickeration. He gets 46 yards on this play alone. He would have 58 receiving yards, 33 rushing yards, and 2 touchdowns for 21.1 points. And the New England defense gives up 24 points to the Chargers, but makes it up with 2 interceptions and a defensive touchdown for 15.1 points. The final score, 97.4 to 84.5. So with the victory, Jordan, he improves to 4-4. Brant has his 3-game winning streak snapped and goes to 5-3. Moving along to the next game on the tally, it was Joey and his Viking Nation versus Nick Kuriliak and his Killer Bees. Both Joey and Nick had players on Thursday night. Joey with Zach Ertz. He had a touchdown as an Eagle 2 weeks ago, a touchdown as a Cardinal last week, but came up short this week with only 42 yards and 4.2 points. Nick had DeAndre Hopkins, D-Hop. A nagging hamstring injury kept him in and out of the game. He would finish with only 2 receptions, but they went for 66 yards and 6.6 points. But their receiving corps on Sunday came through for him. Joey with Deebo Samuel, 17.1 points the hard way. All volume, 6 receptions, 171 yards for that 17.1 points. And Adam Thielen, the homer, 6 receptions, 78 yards, and a touchdown on Sunday night for 13.8 points. Nick, Brandon Cooks finally gets a touchdown pass from Davis Mills, ending a 5-week drought. Brandon Cooks, 6 receptions, 83 yards, and a touchdown for 14.3 points. And Michael Pittman Jr. in Indianapolis against the Titans does most of his damage in the first quarter, his 2 touchdowns coming only within minutes apart. He finished with 10 receptions, 86 yards, those 2 touchdowns, and 20.6 points. What blew the game open was Nick's running game. Michael Carter, in that shocker up in New York against the Bengals, has 77 rushing yards, a rushing touchdown, but adds 95 yards through the air, 23.2 points for the rookie. And that ended up being the difference. 102.2 for Nick, 75.2 for Joey. Interestingly, in this one, the quarterbacks and non-factor, both Kirk Cousins for Joey and Patrick Mahomes for Nick, barely scored above 13 points each. So with the victory, Nick improves to 3-5. Joey with the loss also goes to 3-5. And there you have it, Week 8 in the books. In the battle of the 2 top teams in the LVFL, the buzzsaw that is Oswego comes out on top and is now the undisputed number 1 team in the LVFL at 7-1. The Tampa Bay Champions now on a 2-game losing streak, and it might not end at 2 games. Derrick Henry out for 6 to 10 weeks. Best case scenario is that he's back in week 14 just in time for the fantasy football playoffs, but don't count on it. No one's going to risk Derrick Henry's career by rushing him back so soon. So for fantasy purposes, Derrick Henry is out the rest of the way, as is Las Vegas's own Henry Ruggs III, involved in a DUI accident that ended up in a fatality. He's only 22 years old, his career just beginning, and it might be over. It's a sad story no matter how you look at it. Those were the headlines for Week 8. It's now time to pass out some cheese. Our Offensive Player of the Week goes to Josh Allen. 249 passing yards, 55 rushing yards, 3 total touchdowns for 30.9 points. I don't know if I ever considered Josh Allen as a true dual-threat quarterback, but it seems like the Buffalo Bills are expanding his role in the rushing game, which only adds to the headache of stopping Josh Allen, our Offensive Player of the Week. Our Offensive Snub of the Week is going to go to Pedro for having Elijah Mitchell on the bench. 137 yards, 1 touchdown, and 19.7 points. Pedro, it looks like you've added a nice little piece to your running back core ever since Clyde Edwards-Helaire went on injured reserve. With 6 games to go, hopefully it's not too late. But either way, start the man. Elijah Mitchell, our Offensive Snub of the Week. And Pete's Troll of the Week is going to be the New Orleans Saints. The Saints have had 2 of the most gut-wrenching losses in NFL playoff history, the Minneapolis Miracle in the divisional round versus the Vikings, and the infamous non-call against Nickel Roby-Coleman in the NFC Championship. If they would have only had the GOAT back then, the refs would have given Tom Brady that pass interference call. The Saints would have been so far ahead that the Minneapolis Miracle wouldn't have made a difference. Drew Brees could have stuck around and grabbed another couple of rings, and when the Saints come marching in would now be when the Saints brought Tom Brady in, had Tom Brady been a New Orleans Saint. Pete's Troll of the Week for Week 5 was the Miami Dolphins. In the 1985 Super Bowl, the Dan Marino-led Miami Dolphins played Joe Montana and the San Francisco 49ers. From there, both the quarterback and the franchises went into very different career paths. Joe Montana established the 49ers dynasty and went on to be considered the GOAT for decades to come. Dan Marino and the Miami Dolphins, well, not so much. If they only had the GOAT back then. Marino would have his ring, albeit in a backup role. The Dolphins would be a proud franchise, Montana a footnote in history, and Calle Ocho would now be Calle Doce had Tom Brady been a Miami Dolphin. 6 games to go in the fantasy football season, which means we will begin our playoff watch. We'll bring that to you starting next week, but for now we sign off and we'll see you in week 9. This is The Cap, the flagship podcast of the LVFL. And to everybody out there in the LVFL universe, we say good night from league offices.